Have you ever looked at your life and thought that nothing will ever change? That no matter what you do, things will always be this way? Maybe you're stuck in a job you hate, in a financial situation that seems impossible, in relationships that drain you dry. And you've tried to change so many times that you've given up on trying. You blame the government, the economy, your family, bad luck. You blame everything and everyone except the one thing that can actually change first: the way you think. And as long as your mind stays the same, your life will stay the same too. This is the story of a homeless man who spent 20 years on the streets of Chicago. He slept in cardboard boxes, ate scraps from trash cans, begged for change at traffic lights. Everyone who walked past him saw a lost cause, a man with no future, someone who had given up on life. Even he believed it himself. Until one day, a stranger stopped, not to give money, but to ask a question that no one had ever asked him before. A simple question that planted a seed in that man's mind. What happened next proves that the most powerful change doesn't start in your wallet, your resume, or your circumstances. It starts right here inside. Stay with me until the end, because this story could be the turning point you've been needing. It doesn't matter where you are right now. It doesn't matter how many times you've failed, or how many people have given up on you. Your current situation is not your final sentence. It's just a reflection of your mindset up until now. And if the mindset can be changed, everything can be changed. Maybe today is the day you finally understand that the strongest prison isn't made of bars, but of thoughts. And the key to get out has always been with you. On the frozen streets of Chicago, underneath a viaduct on the south side of the city, lived a man named Raymond. He was 52 years old, but he looked 70. A long, dirty beard, skin weathered by cold and sun, torn clothes he had worn for months without changing. Raymond was invisible. People walked past him every day without looking, without stopping, without recognizing that there was a human being there. To the world, he was just another homeless man, another social problem, another statistic. To himself, it was even worse. Raymond believed he was nothing. It hadn't always been this way. 30 years earlier, Raymond was a promising young man. He grew up in a poor neighborhood, but he had dreams. He wanted to be a musician, to play piano in grand theaters, to make people feel something through his hands. He had talent. His teachers said so. His friends said so. But his father said something different. Music isn't a man's job. You'll starve to death. You're not good enough. People like us don't get anywhere. Raymond heard these words every day, and slowly they entered his mind and built an invisible prison. At 20, Raymond abandoned music. He got a job at a factory, married a woman he didn't love, had 2 kids he barely knew. He worked, came home, slept, and repeated. There was no joy, no purpose, just survival. He told himself that this was how life worked for people like him, that dreams were a luxury for rich people. That reality was harsh, and there was nothing he could do about it. His mind was programmed to accept mediocrity as destiny, and mediocrity was exactly what he received. At 35, the factory closed. Raymond lost his job and couldn't find another one. His wife left and took the kids. He started drinking to forget, and alcohol took over everything. First he lost the apartment, then his friends, then his dignity. Within 2 years, he was on the streets. At first, he thought it was temporary, that he would soon find a way to get back on his feet. But months turned into years, and years turned into decades. Raymond stopped trying. He stopped believing that anything could change. His mind had accepted that viaduct as his final destination. 20 years passed. Raymond knew every crack in the concrete where he slept, every trash can where he found food, every face of the other homeless people who shared that hell with him. Some died from the cold in winter. Others were taken by the police and never came back. Raymond survived. He didn't live, he just existed. Every day the same. Wake up hungry, beg for change, be ignored, find something to eat, sleep, and repeat. He had no hope. Hope was a word he had forgotten the meaning of. On a November morning, Raymond was sitting in his usual spot at the exit of a subway station with a plastic cup in front of him asking for coins. People rushed past, looking at their phones, stepping around him like he was an obstacle. Nobody stopped. Nobody ever stopped. Until one man did. He was a gentleman in his 60s, well-dressed, wearing a grey overcoat and a red scarf. He didn't throw coins in the cup. He didn't offer food. He just stood there, looking at Raymond with a curious expression, as if he was seeing something that others couldn't see. Raymond felt uncomfortable. After 20 years of being ignored, being looked in the eyes was almost painful. "What do you want?" he asked with a hoarse voice, expecting the man to leave. But the man didn't leave. Instead, he crouched down to Raymond's level and asked a question that no one had asked in 2 decades. "If you could change one thing in your life right now, just one thing, what would it be?" Raymond was silent. No one had ever asked what he wanted. No one cared what a homeless man wanted. He opened his mouth to answer, but realized he didn't know. It had been so long since he had stopped wanting anything that the question didn't seem to make sense. The man in the grey overcoat didn't leave. He sat down next to Raymond on the cold ground, not caring about the dirt, not caring about the looks from people passing by. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then the man spoke. "My name is George. 40 years ago, I was sitting exactly where you are now, in this same city, in this same cold, with this same hunger." Raymond looked at him in disbelief. The expensive suit, the gold watch, the polished shoes. Impossible that this man had been homeless. George smiled, as if reading his thoughts. "I know what you're thinking, that I'm lying, that people like us don't change their lives." George took out his wallet and showed an old photograph, yellowed by time. In it, a thin young man with a dirty beard and empty eyes held a sign asking for help. It was him. The same defeated expression that Raymond saw in his own reflection in store windows. "I spent 8 years on the streets," George said. "I thought it was my destiny, that God had abandoned me, that I was good for nothing. My mind was so full of negative thoughts that there was no room for anything else, until someone did for me what I'm doing for you now." They stopped and asked me a question. Raymond swallowed hard. "What question?" George looked into his eyes. "The same one I asked you. If you could change one thing in your life, what would it be?" When they asked me that, I didn't know how to answer. Just like you. Because when you spend years believing you don't deserve anything, you forget what it's like to want something. But the question stayed in my head. Days, weeks, months. And slowly, I started to remember. Remember who I was before. Remember the dreams I had buried. The question opened a door I thought was locked forever. George continued. "The person who helped me didn't give me money, didn't give me a job, didn't solve my problems. They gave me something far more valuable." He pointed to his own head. "They showed me that my prison was in here, that as long as I kept thinking like a homeless man, I would be homeless forever. It didn't matter if someone gave me $1 million. With the wrong mindset, I would lose it all again. The change had to start in my thinking. First you change your mind, then your mind changes your reality." Raymond felt something move in his chest, something that felt like anger, but wasn't. It was something he hadn't felt in a long time. "Resistance. But you don't understand," he said. "I have nothing, no home, no family, no skills. I have nothing to offer the world." George shook his head. "You have the only thing that truly matters. You have the ability to choose what you think. Right now, you can choose to keep believing you're a lost cause, or you can choose to believe there's still a chance. Both options are in front of you. Which one are you going to choose?" Raymond was silent. Part of him wanted to tell the man to leave, to go back to his miserable routine, to keep running on the autopilot of survival. It was easier, it was familiar. Change was scary. But another part, a part he thought had died 20 years ago, was whispering something different. What if he's right? What if everything they told you about yourself is a lie? What if there's still time? Raymond looked at George and said, his voice trembling, "I used to want to play piano again." It was the first time in 30 years he had said that out loud. George smiled. "That's a start." He took a card from his pocket and handed it to Raymond. "This is the address of a shelter that helps people rebuild their lives. It's not charity, it's work. You're going to have to work harder than you ever have. You're going to have to change thoughts you've been carrying for decades. It's going to be hard. Most people quit. But if you really want to change, this is the first step." Raymond took the card with his dirty, trembling hands. He looked at the address, then at George. "Why are you helping me? Why do you care?" George stood up, adjusted his overcoat and said before walking away, "Because someone cared about me once. And the only way to repay that debt is to pass it forward." Raymond spent 3 days staring at that card. He slept with it in his pocket, woke up and read the address again, as if the words might disappear. Part of him said it was a scam, that nobody helps anyone for free, that he would show up and be humiliated once more. But George's question wouldn't leave his head. If you could change one thing, what would it be? He had answered piano, and for the first time in decades he had admitted that he still wanted something, that there was still a piece of him that hadn't completely died. On the morning of the 4th day, Raymond gathered his few belongings in a plastic bag and walked to the address on the card. It was a simple building in a middle-class neighborhood with a discreet sign on the door, "New Beginning Center." He hesitated on the sidewalk for almost an hour. People came and went. Some looked as lost as him. Others seemed to be rebuilding themselves. When he finally gathered the courage to enter, a woman in her 50s greeted him with a smile. She didn't look at his dirty clothes, didn't wrinkle her nose at the smell. She looked into his eyes and said, "You came at the right time." The first months were the hardest of Raymond's life. The shelter offered a bed, food and work, but demanded something in return: total commitment to change. Every morning there were group sessions where residents had to talk about their beliefs, their fears, their automatic thoughts. Raymond discovered he carried an internal voice that had been repeating the same phrases for decades. "You're not good enough. People like you can't make it. You're going to fail again." It was his father's voice, and he had let that voice run his entire life without questioning it. The work at the center was learning to identify those thoughts and replace them. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. Raymond had days when he wanted to give up, go back to the viaduct, go back to what was familiar. At least there he knew what to expect, but every time he thought about leaving, he remembered George. If he made it, so can I. It was a simple thought, but it was new. It was different. It was the beginning of a different mindset. And slowly, thought by thought, Raymond began to rebuild himself from the inside. After 6 months at the center, Raymond got a cleaning job at a music school. It wasn't the piano, but it was close. He cleaned the rooms, arranged the chairs, and sometimes when everyone had left, he stood staring at the grand piano in the auditorium. One night, the school director found him standing there, looking at the instrument with tears in his eyes. "Do you play?" he asked. Raymond hesitated. "I used to, a long time ago." The director pointed to the bench. Then, "Play." Raymond sat down, hands trembling, heart racing. He placed his fingers on the keys and played the only song he still remembered. A melody his mother used to sing when he was a child. When he finished, the director was silent. Then he said, "You have free lessons every Tuesday and Thursday if you want." 2 years later, Raymond was no longer the same man. He lived in a small apartment, but it was his. He worked as an assistant piano teacher for underprivileged children at the same school where he had been a janitor. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, he didn't play in grand theatres, but he woke up every day with purpose. When he looked in the mirror, he no longer saw a homeless man. He saw a man who had walked through hell and chosen not to stay there. The change didn't start when he got a job. It started on that cold morning when George asked a question and Raymond decided to answer differently. My friend, Raymond's story is proof that your circumstances don't define your destiny. Your mindset does. Raymond spent 20 years on the streets, not because he was incapable, but because he believed he was incapable. His prison was made of thoughts, not bars, and the key was always with him. It was just waiting for him to decide to use it. You could be in any situation right now. You could be at rock bottom or just dissatisfied with life. It doesn't matter. The principle is the same. As long as your mind stays the same, your life will stay the same. Change your thinking first. The rest will follow. If this story touched you in any way, hit that like button right now. That simple gesture helps more people find this message when they need it most. Leave a comment telling me which thought you need to change today. And if you know someone who is trapped in their own mind, someone who has given up on believing they can change, share this video with that person. Subscribe to this channel for more stories like this every week. And remember, the strongest prison is the one you can't see, but the key is with you. It always has been. The question is, are you going to use it?